Good evening, you are tuning in to AWANI Tonight with me, Saraya Mia. King lifts emergency in Sarawak, paving the way for state elections. And as COP26 takes center stage, Malaysian youths say count them in at climate decision making. That's coming up. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong consented to end the state of emergency in Sarawak earlier today. This paves the way for the much-anticipated Sarawak elections, delayed due to the COVID-19 situation hampered by an extended emergency. In a statement, Istana Negara said the decision was made following an audience granted by the King to Sarawak Governor Tun Abdul Taib Mahmud, who requested that the emergency in Sarawak be ended. Other than that, an audience was also granted to Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob ahead of a cabinet meeting at which the King had consented to receive his advice on ending Sarawak's state of emergency. According to the palace, His Majesty's consent to end the proclamation of emergency for Sarawak is in line with Articles 40 and 41A of the Federal Constitution. The King also voiced concerns about the risk of an increase in COVID-19 infections if a state election is held, as he stressed that the safety and well-being of the people should be prioritized above personal and political interests. The Health Ministry does not recommend using Ivermectin to treat COVID-19 patients. This follows an Ivermectin effectiveness test done on high-risk patients that found the drug yielded no significant differences in recovery.
In a statement, Health Director General Tan Sri Dr. Noor Hisham Abdullah said the main aim of the study was to see if Ivermectin administered during the first week of illness prevented deterioration to stage 4 or 5 among hospitalized patients aged 50 years and above with at least one comorbidity. The study found that patients in both groups had a similar rate of progression to severe COVID-19 symptoms. Noor Hisham reiterated that the ministry's findings were supported by other recent studies conducted in Argentina and Brazil, both of which also do not support the use of Ivermectin in clinical practice. He also warned medical practitioners against recommending, illegally advertising, or selling the drug to treat COVID-19. The study involved 500 hospitalized patients in stage 2 and 3 of COVID-19, involving a 5-day course of the drug, compared to another group undergoing standard care.
Malaysia is committed to making stalking a crime. Deputy Minister in the Prime Minister's Department in charge of Law and Parliament, Datuk Mas Ermiati Samsudin, said anti-stalking laws will be introduced with its draft and policy paper brought to Cabinet as early as December. She said once the policy paper and proposed legal amendments are approved by the Cabinet, it will then be tabled in Parliament. Mas said efforts to make stalking a crime started in 2019 when an anti-stalking committee was established. According to her, in early 2020, legal amendments such as amendments to the Penal Code and Criminal Procedure Code have been prepared by the Anti-Stalking Committee. The committee is led by the Legal Affairs Division with the involvement of other government agencies and NGOs. Previously, women's aid organizations said, aside from helping survivors, an anti-stalking law would help society better understand stalking and how it affects victims. UMNO's Datuk Seri Tajuddin Abdul Rahman called on the government to ditch the welfare mentality of constantly giving handouts and subsidies to uplift Bumi Putras. He said if the country wanted to be a developed nation, a new Bumi Putra economic policy must be reintroduced and not be based on handouts.
Kita nak tolong Melayu dengan cara pergi bantuan subsidi. Bantuan handout, bantuan. Ini welfare, okay. I support this. We need to give it all this. Terutama sekarang dalam masa tempoh kita COVID ni. Tetapi this is welfare. How long we want to go on with the welfare state? We have to move further. We want to be a developed country, high-income country. So it's not enough.
Debating Budget 2022 in the Dewan Rakyat today, the Pasir Salah MP said the problem started with the National Development Policy introduced by former Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad in the 1990s. He said a change was needed and urged the Finance Ministry to come up with a new Bumi Putra economic policy which can actually achieve its goals. Malaysian youths want to be included in decision-making processes when it comes to climate action. Youth for Climate delegate Mogesh Sababati calls for the government to create a mechanism that allows the Malaysian community to voice out opinions and contribute to climate governance.
We're looking at the global perspective. Young people are generally the most vulnerable group to climate change, and it's our right to get involved in matters that affects us. So I hope that we see more inclusive and transparent youth participation in decision-making processes, build the capacity of youths with climate knowledge, skills and resources. And we want to see the Malaysian government to have stronger commitment for effective engagements with the youths, with other stakeholders, and strengthen climate governance in Malaysia. And all this have to happen now because we don't have much time anymore.
Mogesh hopes that there will be something significant from the United Nations Climate Summit, or COP26. He and many youths globally hope to see real action and not just empty talk.
What I personally hope to see after COP26 this year is not just an ambitious and pretty-looking post-COP report, but we want to see progressive moves. We want to see substantial changes. We've had too many conversations. So it's COP26. That means we've been talking for the last 26 years. Way too many conversations. We have had plenty of solutions on the table to the problems that we're facing, but we just we just need to deploy them at the rate that the crisis demands at the moment.
Mogesh added that Malaysia needs to pivot from a purely GDP-based economy to a more environmentally sustainable economy.
We've been looking at conditions like sea level rise, reduced crop yields in the last few years, greater disease spreading, and a lot of loss of species and all this, flood intensities and etc., including coral reef bleaching and all this. So when we are looking at all this, it's really important that we start to build economy models that are no longer entirely based on GDPs alone, but it's also important that we produce economy models that would rather make use of the natural resources and protect them equally, and make sure that we always go through we have to always balance and check.
Time for a quick break. Stay with us.
Ayuh keluarga Malaysia, kita bulatkan tekad dan bersatu hati untuk terus memelihara serta mempertahankan kedaulatan negara. Sebagai keluarga Malaysia yang besar, kita harus bertoleransi dalam semua perkara. Hormat menghormati serta mengekalkan perpaduan rakyat yang berbilang kaum, agama dan bangsa, serta integrasi nasional silang budaya adalah tunjang kekuatan kita sebagai sebuah negara bangsa yang berjaya. Umpama selembar benang dikait, ditenun dan dijalin, akhirnya menjadi kain yang sempurna indah.
Welcome back. Staying on COP26, China has hit back against criticism by US President Joe Biden, who accused Beijing of not showing leadership after President Xi Jinping skipped COP26 summit in Glasgow. Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin in a statement said tackling climate change requires actions and not just empty rhetorics.
Wang pointed out China's recent achievements in reforestation and renewable energy, including starting a wind power PV project with a scale of about 30 million kilowatts. He also slammed the US's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement under the Donald Trump administration and urged the US to make concrete policies and measures on emission reduction and put them into practice as soon as possible. Xi Jinping is not known to have left China during the pandemic. He has not joined world leaders at COP26, addressing observers and delegates in a written message on Monday instead. China is the world's biggest emitter of carbon and has pledged to begin reducing that output by 2030 and obtaining carbon neutrality by 2060.
New COVID-19 cases in China spiked to a 3-month high despite increasingly aggressive measures by the government to control the outbreak. Local infections have been found in 19 of 31 provinces so far.
China reported 93 new local symptomatic cases for Tuesday, up from 54 a day earlier, and the highest daily count since August 9th. Authorities are expected to impose tighter restrictions in the capital Beijing ahead of a key meeting of the highest-ranking members of the Communist Party next week. Beijing authorities have also repeatedly told residents to refrain from travelling out of the city and cut back on all non-essential gatherings. On Tuesday, the government urged families to stockpile daily necessities, prompting panic buying. Recent surge in food prices have been linked to extreme weather, fears of supply shortages, and the ongoing COVID outbreak.
The World Food Programme started distributing money to the poor in Afghanistan as the economy is on the brink of collapse. It warns that millions of Afghans are facing starvation unless there's a massive scale-up in humanitarian response by the international community.
Thousands of families will each receive 3,500 Afghani, or about $33 per month, for the next 4 months. The Taliban has banned the use of foreign currencies in Afghanistan, a move that could further disrupt the economy. After the Taliban seized control of the country in August, billions of dollars of Afghanistan's overseas assets were frozen by the US Federal Reserve and central banks in Europe. The US dollar has been used widely in Afghanistan's markets. The United Nations predicts 95% of the population will go hungry, and as much as 97% of the country risks sinking below the poverty line.
The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership RCEP trade agreement will take effect at the start of January. According to the Australian government, the pact can enter into force now that Australia and New Zealand have both ratified the deal. RCEP is the world's largest trade pact, representing about 30% of the global population and GDP. It is designed to remove tariffs on over 90% of goods and standardize rules on investment, intellectual property, and e-commerce, among other trade practices. RCEP involves 10 members of ASEAN and their 5 free trade agreement partners, namely Australia, China, Japan, New Zealand, and South Korea. The agreement will come into force 60 days after at least 6 ASEAN member states and 3 dialogue partners have ratified it. Malaysia, meanwhile, has yet to ratify RCEP. In October, the government said it is in the process to amend 3 acts under the Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs Ministry, and they're expected to be tabled in Parliament at year-end. A 4-year-old girl who went missing for 18 days in a remote part of Western Australia has been found alive. Cleo Smith was rescued by police in a locked house about 100 kilometers from the campsite she went missing from. A 36-year-old man was arrested in connection with the case.
Police said they smashed their way into the home of the suspect in the early hours of Wednesday following a tip-off. The girl disappeared from her family's tent at a campsite near the town of Carnarvon, about 900 kilometers from Perth, on October 16th, triggering a massive search. Australian police offered a $1 million reward for any information leading to the girl's whereabouts. Cleo Smith has now been returned safely to her parents.
Under Budget 2022, the government announced the Jamin Kerja Initiative, a job guarantee scheme which aims to create 600,000 new jobs to address rising unemployment. On Consider This, we speak to our guests about the government's role in job creation. That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news updates on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from AstroAwani.com and the Astro AWANI app. I'm Saraya Mia. We'll see you soon.